Hi there, my name is Kelly Cody Grimm.
And I'm Max Grimm.
And we are Creative Actors Lab. What we want to do is just talk a little bit about how you can bring creativity into your everyday life. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being here. We really appreciate it. I'm Kelly.
And I'm Max, and this is amazing because we're doing this podcast in like an actual studio.
I know.
With actual microphones and computers, and oh my God.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is. So, we're going to give a shout out to Gwinnett County Library. They have these nice facilities where you can actually film with a green screen. So that is like totally awesome. But anyway, so what we wanted to cover today in the podcast is basically your business is show business. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how that's working?
I would, but I'm just so amazed to be here and actually doing stuff like this. What I wanted to say is, the thing, we've run into a lot of people acting students who come into it and they have never, ever acted before, or so they think. And we start talking to them, and then it's like the question comes up, well, what do you do? What do you do for a living? And you'll get answers like teacher, policeman, bartender. One guy in particular said, I work in a psychiatric facility. You have more experience with acting than you're really giving yourself credit for or that you're really conscious of. But for policemen, you're having to put on a certain face and control the situation and make sure that things are being communicated in a very specific way. Bartenders, same thing. Doctors, when they have to, speak with nurses as well, when they have to, speak to patients about their conditions, you have to be very mindful of what you're saying and how you're saying it, and how you're communicating to whomever it is that you're communicating to. That's kind of the basis of acting, beyond the scripts and the rehearsals and developing the characters and all that sort of a thing. We just find that, acting pops up in so many other vocations that have nothing to do with scripts or commercials or getting in movies or plays and, getting famous and making $1 million and things like that. So that's what we're here to talk about.
And, it was interesting. I was actually on a business call the other day. And one of the things that really came up was developing avatars for your ideal customer. Mm-hmm. And in a way, I thought this is very much like what you get with casting directors, because, casting directors, people, when they're looking at their script, they're saying, this is the actor that I would really like to have portray this particular role. So I thought it was interesting that just within sales, it's like, okay, who is your ideal actor? Who is your ideal audience that you're going to want to pitch this particular, and in this case, it was supplemental insurance for benefits. And so it was really interesting let's think of who they are so you can narrow your audience, because you really cannot be all things to all people, clearly. One of the things that I thought was interesting while I was listening to this was I was writing down the note is your business is show business. And not only are you going from the point of view of being a casting director and trying to put the right people in the right roles to make sure that your production, i.e. business, is going to go smoothly, but you also have to make sure that everybody is literally on the same script and on the same page. And I think that's where a lot of problems in businesses really do tend to have an issue is right from the get-go, maybe you're not putting the right people in the right places.
Any director, any good director, first and foremost knows casting is at least 80% of it. I've
even heard 90%.
Yeah. But I can remember times back in the day, particularly when I was really young and really, really new to acting. I remember running across some directors who had this idea that I can put anybody in this role, and because I'm such a brilliant director, I can make these random people, turn in these stellar performances. No, I can't. It just doesn't work that way, and it led to less than stellar performances with that sort of egotistical, narcissistic, thing. It's like, I can drag the performance out of them. Well, you can drag a performance out of them. It's just not going to be as good as it could be if you had the right person in the right job. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I'll say for myself, just in during the times, especially when I was running my theater company back in the day, it was so difficult to get the right people in the right parts. And so what I did eventually is I would hold these big auditions that would, go on, sometimes for a couple of days. And whoever showed up. And I would have just this library of plays that I thought would be really cool to do, rather than saying, okay, I'm going to do this play, and then I'm going to do this play, and then that play for this particular season. It's like, let's see who shows up, and let's see who interacts and plays nice vibe with each other, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. And then pick the plays based on that. And I would have like maybe 20 or 30 plays in mind that I wanted to do, and that, realistically I could do them on the budget that I was working on and in the space I was working on, but, I could adapt all of that. But my personal approach to it was I was very centered upon the actors. I did Mice and Men and all these other wonderful shows, but it's just kind of like, if I couldn't get the right people to play those parts, it was just going to be at best a substandard production, and life's too short for substandard, and so it's just like, let's just see who shows up, let's get the right people into the right parts, and then go from there. And I think it was Tony Randall said something one time. He was talking about a part that he was playing in the play M. Butterfly on Broadway, and he was getting all of these accolades and all this positive press and all this stuff. And I remember he described it as, sometimes as an actor, you get a role that is just the most comfortable suit of clothes, is the way he described a particular, just the particular roles. It's like, sometimes you would get cast in these shows, and it was just the metaphor of a suit of clothes for the character that you were to play. Sometimes it just wasn't fit right, and all the tailoring and all of the adjustments, they never really compensated for the fact that it's like, you're just not the right person to play this role, not that you don't have talent. But not everyone, no one can be all things to all people. Mm-hmm. Not in business, certainly not in acting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. And I think, my experience has been in business, and then also having to manage people, it really is trying to manage expectations. Mm-hmm. Sometimes as acting coaches, we'll have people come in and they will be absolutely certain that they are going to get the Standard Rich and Famous contract because they are so beautiful and unique and everything. Mm-hmm. And I really, where Max and I try to point them is into videos of very well-established actors who have said, it took me years, but I learned so much in the years that I wasn't getting things, or I was getting smaller things. I had time to hone my craft, and it's not an easy art form. But what I tell people to do is, and we can talk about the SAG-AFTRA strike in a little bit, but a lot of times I think having those side gigs, those other jobs where you are not immersed in the constant flow of acting and theater. Because I've known people that did that. They just would immerse themselves into theater, and when it came time for them to portray an everyday Joe or Jan, they couldn't really relate to it because they didn't know what it was like just to have to wait on a customer who was impossible, or a boss that expected you to meet this ridiculous deadline in no time at all because their bosses, your lack of planning is not my emergency.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times that's what, they were facing. So when they had to, sort of play characters that were struggling in this world, they didn't have any real world substitution to put in there. And that, I think, handicapped them. So, I think whatever real life experience that you can bring, particularly jobs. I love listening to The Office Ladies as a podcast. And one of the things that both Jenna Fisher and Angela Kinsey talk about is they both worked in offices. So they could bring things that other actors who hadn't worked in offices didn't have, and they would pitch ideas. And some of those ideas that they would pitch to the writer would get used because they're like, that's authentic.
I remember I remember having this conversation with you. We were in a play together, and I remember driving away, and I started to get actually really concerned about myself because I was going through a period of time, and this sounds wonderful, and it was in many ways, but I was doing so much theater. And when I wasn't on stage, I was working in a scene shop, building scenery and hanging lights and, doing stage painting and things like that. And that was what I did. I was pretty much after my first cup of coffee, until the time that I went to bed, I was in somewhere or other immersed in acting and theater, and I was, rehearsing new scripts and doing plays and all of that stuff. And I remember driving away, and I'm thinking to myself, this is really, we're playing make-believe. That's one of the things. It's this, acting is you're playing make-believe and you are telling stories. And I remember thinking to myself, like, I'm starting to lose touch with reality. And that's making me kind of nervous. And, the times that I, had other jobs, working in restaurants or temp agencies and some of the assignments I would get, or the marketing company that I worked for, and all of this sort of thing was kind of like, the thing I found was very, very beneficial is those jobs keep you grounded. And they keep, you have one foot in reality, but while you have the other foot in the world of make-believe. And it's like, if you do get fortunate enough to really just pursue acting and really do what you want to do as far as that goes, the downside of it is you really have to keep yourself grounded in reality. And one thing, and I'll just say this and I'll put it out there, a lot of people, I think, and this is, I think, always been the case, but a lot of people get brought into acting with the idea of, I'm going to get rich and famous. And that's the main draw. It's like, rich and famous. Psychologists could have any amount of fun with actors and, why we do what we do and why we want to portray other people and tell other people's stories. And I mean, that's a podcast in and of itself right there. A lot of people are drawn into it because of the gonna be rich and famous, and for theater actors especially, because you get the immediate gratification of you get up there, you do your thing, and you do your performance, and then all of a sudden 300 people all start looking directly at you and clapping and cheering. I mean, have that happen enough times, that's a very heady experience. A lot of people get drawn into this, as I say, because, they're going to get rich and famous. I certainly hope that happens. But at the same time, if that's the main focus, if that's the main draw, if that's the main pull for you to become an actor, you're going to wind up frustrated because there's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of plain hard work and long hours, and there's a lot of memorization. There's a physicality to it that people don't realize, that you do have to be in a certain amount of shape to do certain roles. And I get particularly worried when it comes to kids. And I love kids. I adore kids so much. I mean, they're just these naturally creative beings. They're, the whole idea of playing make-believe is not foreign to them. They were, they've not lost that quality. And the problem is, and I can think of a couple of specific instances in there of the kid gets told, you're going to get into acting because you're so ding-dang cute, you're going to be famous and all this, and then the parents start going, well, when are we going to get some of that Disney money? And they start, and it really sets the kids up. I mean, it does this really for anybody, but it really sets the kids up with a lot of unrealistic expectations and a lot of potential for disappointment and broken promises, and it basically drags the kid away from what could be such a potentially rewarding artistic experience when you are given the opportunity to, walk a mile in someone else's shoes, albeit fictionally.
Absolutely.
But it takes them out of that. It takes that opportunity away from them. That worries me, and it makes me quite a bit sad.
It's interesting, when I was walking with Amber today, and I was just talking about coaching, and I had a young lady in there, and it may have been the nerves because we coach on Zoom, and I use a term, and this is also something that you kind of do in sales and presentations. You practice your presentation, and you have your elevator speech, and you have it all together, and there's what we call dashboard perfect, living room perfect,
steering wheel perfect,
bathroom mirror perfect, and then you have it there, and then you have people looking at you, whether it's as rectangles on Zoom or actually live, and all of a sudden you feel like all that preparation and everything is going away.
It happens all the time.
It happens all the time.
Everybody.
And I had to explain that, to some of my students. It's like, I know you guys have been working on this, even if it's not memorized. I don't want you to be memorized your first session because I don't want you getting into a memorization pattern that you can't break. But it is, okay to feel your very first time getting up and doing it out loud with people looking at it, to feel intimidated. That's why we do so many sessions. So by the time you get to the point where you are filming your demo reels, you're like, oh, okay, I've done this before. But this one young lady, she was really struggling. And I've had other little kids that the parents just, you could tell this was the desire that the parents had more than the kids. Yeah. And sometimes it's, as we had said in another podcast, sometimes it might be that this was something really fun that the parents did, like, we were talking about with summer camp, and they just assume that their kids are going to love it just as much as them, and then lo and behold, they're just not into it, they're shy, it's not the same thing. But this one young lady just, she, when it came time to do it, she was covering her face. She just, and then her mom's like, oh, do it, you did it good. And I'm just like, Mom. And what I think screws up a lot of there's so many things that can screw up a child actor, but I think fundamentally knowing I am responsible for the livelihoods of the adults that are behind the cameras and that are doing everything, particularly if it's, a big end production. I remember working on one movie, and this one kid, the kid felt the pressure of, I keep on messing up my lines, and I'm keeping this person and Glenn Close waiting. And I know that was something that was weighing on his mind. He kept on doing it over and over again, and I just kept on thinking, honey, I just want to hug you, and I'm not your acting coach, but it's like, there is something really unnatural for you to feel like, I am having to support these adults with what I'm doing. Again, and that's also within the working world, we should not have kids, feeling like they're responsible. If they're coming in as interns and things like that, give them the amount of responsibility that they need at that point in their career. Please don't sit there and go, okay, the entire show rests on your little 6-year-old shoulders.
Yeah. That's making me think of, there's the book by Jeanette McCurdy. She was on iCarly, which our kids watched, but she wrote a book called I'm Glad My Mom Died. The book is amazing, but it's about, her growing up with a mother who basically, it was mom's dream that for mom to be the actress, and Jeanette wanted to be a writer. And the mother was really always kind of squashing that. You don't want to be a writer, you want to be an actress because you love acting, don't you?
Just like me. You've got to be like me.
There's so much of parents trying to live out their own dreams vicariously through their kids, and the kids actually want no part of it. If you, I would say this: if you have an opportunity, read the book. It's a great book, and there are some parts of it you just are reading this and going, "Oh my God, how did this poor young kid survive all of this mess?" And it led her through all kinds of, eating disorders and, just all this trauma being put upon a young kid. It's just unintentionally cruel to do that to a child. Now, granted, in this book, this is a pretty extreme case, but I will just say, if this is something that you do want to get into, and particularly if you've got young ones around, do read this book. It's frankly a miracle she came out the end of this, all of that trauma, alive and not screwed up, and is going on to do the things that she really wanted to do. But it's such a thing in acting to really try to remain having these childlike qualities of imagination and playing pretend and all that sort of thing, and just to take those very pure qualities and just try to force them into a mold that they just don't fit into.
And I think, again, you're also talking, whether it's child actors or people going out for jobs that they just don't fit into. And, granted, everybody's got to make a living. You need to have money coming in. But if you're doing something that you're just like, okay, I'm getting up, I got to psych myself to go. Yeah, this is what's going to happen and all that. It's going to be really difficult. And that's why, you have things like quiet quitting and people, doing the very minimum that they can. Now, in acting, if you do the very minimum, it's a pretty public thing. So people are going to catch on to the fact that you are doing the very minimum that you can do, and your director is going to let you know that. Your manager may also, you may be taken aside. With so many people doing virtual work, it may be a little bit more difficult for that to come to light, just because you may not be in the same place. But, I think at the end of the day, where your business can be like show business is knowing where the right players should be, understanding what your strategic plan is that you're trying to follow, and getting everybody there. And there is going to be a failure. You just learn through that. And particularly when I was on that sales call and they were talking, your avatars and everything. Okay, so if you have like 100 leads, maybe 10 or 15 of those, 15 on the high end, are going to convert into sales. But you got to make those calls. You've got to try to, get with people. You're just trying to give them advice and help them. Don't start to sell them right from the get-go, because when people feel like they're being sold to, they back away. Again, very much like acting. If you're trying too hard to create this character and do something like that, your audience right away is going to know, and then their reaction is to kind of, pull back. I think the difference, though, when you are acting, because you have a director and you have other players right there helping you, I think just what we all need to be aware of is, what is it that you really want? I've been looking at, different things and coaching opportunities and other things within the arts, and I've been deciding for myself, going, nope. Just like, if you're an actor and you're on Actors Access and you're looking at a job board there, or it's Glassdoor or any number of other job things, just really decide for yourself, what is your objective? And, as you were talking about with being a chef, you probably 2 months ago wouldn't have thought you'd be doing what you're doing.
Oh, no. No, that's a whole other story, but I'm very happy to be doing what I'm currently doing. It's something I love. It's something I love, honestly, as much as I love acting in the arts, and I'm able to do it for a living now. And it's a lot of work. However, I love it. I have been in other jobs that are also very demanding, that I either didn't really feel one way or the other about, or I really didn't like it. And that is all the difference right there. I've never understood people who start a business, or they work within a particular industry, and they hate it. And the first thing that they do is say, I'm going to go start my own business. Well, okay, what business do you want to do? Exactly the industry that they hate in the first place. And I've never understood these people who go and start businesses in fields that they hate in the first place. It's not going to get better. It's going to get worse, And that can really happen with acting. I've seen a lot of people become very disillusioned and disenchanted with it. And there was a time that was I felt very much the same way myself, that, when it comes to a point of you're not loving your job anymore, it's time to go do something else. You deserve to be happy.
Exactly. And my hat for the longest time was working in nonprofits, and it did make me happy to help other people and sit there and go, I'm helping, I'm doing improv at night, but during the day I'm helping, young girls in India and other international places get education. I'm helping with international family planning and all this. But as noble as those goals were, sometimes the people in charge of those organizations didn't have it together, and I found myself drained to the point where and I remember turning to you and going, I just don't want to help people anymore. I cannot do it. It's not appreciated. And I'm like, this is so not my worldview. I'm happy, bouncy, we're all in this together. Let's help people. And for me to sit there and just feel like, I just screw people, that was not me. And then I realized that when I stepped away from that and then tried some other things, now I want to, come back either as a volunteer or do those other things. But I realize now, because I've had that distance, I'm way better saying this is what I want, this is what I don't want. If this is what you're going to offer me, the answer is no. Being able to stand in your power, and I think too, as an actor, actors a lot of times will jump at the first thing. Oh, they want me, yay, yay. And again, we'll talk about the strike in a little bit, but that is, you have people in all industries that know that love and that enthusiasm, and man, they can manipulate that. And then the end product is that all those people that you thought would really love to be in an industry and do what you do, you have alienated so many people. Now you have a labor shortage because you took advantage of that, you went the cheap route, and this is the repercussions.
And I noticed that a lot in education.
Oh, yes.
So many people come into education, and they're just, these first-year teachers come in, and they are just all full of enthusiasm, and they're going to change the world, and the system just crushes and drains them. And what a shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And when I see that, and I think too, so let's talk a little bit about the strike that's going on right now. That is a huge, and not just, you're not looking just at writers and actors, but now you've got the Teamsters saying, maybe it's time for a renegotiation. And, these are people that probably love, being in their trucks, being in the open, being able to do things, really being on their own. And I think that's really what you're seeing with the strike right now, is not only do you have writers striking since May 1st, not only do you have the actors striking since the 12th or 13th, and now you've got the Teamsters saying that they're going to strike because you've had people at the top of those industries saying we're going to take as much as we possibly can. But then the reality is, when you talk to actors and what they were getting for residuals back when there were Nielsen ratings and things like that, they were getting pretty good. You could live off the residuals of a major TV show for a little bit, even if you weren't getting that. But, I'm hearing some of the people on the picket line with the streaming that, their quarterly checks are anywhere from 3 cents to $1.25. So this one guy in a year might make $5 in residuals. And these are pretty high-end actors. They're not just Sean Gunn, was talking about that. So, we're not talking about, people that are doing background. And then another aspect of it, which I find really disturbing, is, hey, we can take background people, we can scan their faces, we can pay them for one day, but if they're not paying, they're looking at their terms and agreements, which if you've watched Black Mirror or Jonah's Awful, you want to definitely look at your terms and agreements. So we can just use them over and over again, pay them for one day of work, and then use them in perpetuity.
Well, let me just say, and this happened to me, I'm not going to mention the show, but this was back in the 80s. I was brought in, and they did this to a lot of people, but basically you were called a special extra. I think that was when you were to be, I think it was 5 people or less in a shot. And basically what you would do, they would shoot the scene silently, or MOS, or mittened out sound. And basically you would get up there and you would just kind of move your lips. You would just mouth some words. And after the fact, they'd get into post-production, and then they would have like a voiceover guy come in and dub whatever actual words were to be said. And in doing that, they did not have to give you your SAG card. They did not have to pay you, at the time, I think $200 something a day. That's how far back this goes. But they were pulling that stuff
way back before there was,
way back when. And I'm not going to mention the name of the show or anything like that, but they did that to a lot of people, and that is just not cool.
And that, so when you're thinking that there are people background, and I mean here in Georgia, in LA, you might make between $250 and $350 a day as a background person. But again, you're also paying LA prices for everything.
Consider how expensive it is to live out there.
Yeah, here in Georgia, you might make between $125 and maybe $200 a day. Just depending if you're working overtime. And I've been on sets where, there were people, retired, or people that just, this is what they did. They loved doing it. They wanted to come out. Older people, again, who were retired, wanted a little something extra with their retirement. So to sit there and just say, I am entitled to use your face in perpetuity is wrong. To sit there and tell writers, you've created this content, but I don't want to pay you over and over again. Because again, when you had Nielsen ratings and you had advertisers setting prices and things like that, so you could sit there and say, okay, I'm a #1 ranked show. I think I should, this is what my fee is, and this is what my residual would be, because your ratings are still going to be high going forward. So you haven't had that. And, one of the examples I was using was, you have the heads of these companies right now very disconnected to the fact that a lot of the people that may be working for them basically are eating peanut butter sandwiches 2 or 3 times a day because they can't really afford gas and groceries at the same time. They don't really understand that struggle. And they're making as much in a day or more than maybe 1 or 2 people make all year. And so they can't really relate to that struggle. And that's where, and when you see Hollywood stars out, I saw Bob Odenkirk with a sign that said, I will only memorize lines written by humans.
Yeah.
So Mandy Patinkin had a sign that said, you've killed our residuals, prepare to pay. The fact that you have people at that level out, along with other people who, again, are just barely making a living, might be making $40,000 a year, if that, acting.
If that.
Or writing. There's other issues with, and I've even had this happen, is at jobs, you might have writers and they might be, okay, well, why don't you pitch me some ideas? And so they're in the job interview, they're pitching ideas. So okay, great. They don't get hired. But that log line that they pitched is getting used, and they're not getting paid for that. That happened with me. I had applied for a nonprofit job as a grant writer. This person decided to have, I think, probably 4 or 5 people take little parts of the grant so they could get a writing sample, and I'm saying writing sample in air quotes. turned it in. Hey, lo and behold, I didn't get hired, but you know what? That working interview, they had me take that part of the grant and they used it. Our daughter Amber, working interviews, kids, you've got to be very careful with those. Working interviews. She went in, loves working with animals, pretty much got put in charge of this room of dogs, and the bathrooms weren't working, so if she had to go outside in like January in Atlanta. So basically that 2 or 3 hour job interview was they were bringing people in for a working interview knowing full well that they weren't going to pay them, but that under the guise of a working interview they could exploit that person and that love. And I think if the strikes are doing anything, there's that reckoning of we're not going to take it anymore. It's like you can't, kind of the jig is up. If you're going to ask people to do things, you have absolutely positively got to pay them fairly.
Yeah. I'll just finish up by saying that, this is something that's been sent to us by students is kind of like, I don't have any experience, and I've gone on these things, and people say, well, I'll get exposure. I'm air quoting as I say, exposure. And I'm like, don't do that. I don't care if you have zero experience. I don't care your energy, your enthusiasm, your intellect, your work ethic. That's valuable. That's valuable. Don't let anybody exploit that. Don't allow anybody to basically get you to do free work that they care about the work, but they don't care about you. Don't put yourself in that position, please. And I don't care if you have no experience. You've got to realize your worth. You've got to. It's got to be a fair exchange of goods and services, and that applies to acting as it does to everything else.
I mean, if you're going into a student film and in advance they'll pay you food and they'll give you that, and in advance, and you're like, hey, I'm just doing this, it's experimental, I'm getting a little bit of experience, that is totally fine. But yeah, the people that are also, and we've talked about this, about being aware, but then the people that want you to pay them for the experience.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think just finally, what I'd like to say is, like, in terms of the strike right now, one of the things one of the guys in charge, again, I'm not going to mention names, basically who's saying what the actors are asking for is unreasonable, what the writers are asking for is unreasonable. This guy makes $74,000 a day. Let that sink in for a minute. Value yourselves and don't take any crap from anybody, kids.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So, again, value yourself, know your worth, and say no, because sometimes no leads to new opportunities. So if you kind of shift that paradigm and say, I'm going to look for the answers no, or if they give you no, then that means you're shifting to new opportunities. Again, salespeople, you're going to get a lot of no's before you close that deal. Job applicants, you're going to get a lot of no's before you finally get that job. But yeah, don't settle, though. Don't settle for something that you're going to hate, because at the end of the day, it's just not worth it. But anyway, I hope this has been super helpful. Thank you guys so much. Again, This is our first time recording here.
Yes, we're in an actual studio. Did I happen to mention? Yes, this is so cool. I'm just sitting watching our voices on a waveform on a screen in front of really nice, cool microphones and all of this. And I sincerely hope this is helpful. And if you know of anyone who would find this to be helpful or useful, please forward this to them, and subscribe and share and smash that like button, as they say.
And we're also on Patreon. Support us
on Patreon, please. And thank you guys for listening.
All right. And you guys have a fantastic day, and we will be with you next time. We appreciate you guys tuning in, and keep in mind that you can catch us on our social media, Creative Actors Lab on Instagram and Facebook, and by the same name on YouTube. And for more on what we do, you can go to our website,
creativeactorslab.com, all one word. Thank you for listening. Stay curious, make art, not war. Much love until next time.